I'm going to kill you. I bet the first time you ever heard those words directed at you, or you said them, it was probably to a member of your family. Probably a brother or a sister, a sibling. Now, the family is a special place. Family can be a safe place, a people who surround you with love and forgiveness most of the time. As Martin Luther put it well, the home is where we are shaped and formed. It's where we learn to love and serve our neighbor. It's also the place where we learn to give and to receive forgiveness. It can also be the place where that same forgiveness is denied until, and you fill in the blank, until you do what I want you to do. It can be a place where we learn resentment and manipulation, which can be passed down from generation to generation. Let me tell you a story about a young man and his slingshot. I got your attention now, don't I? Now, this didn't work so very well at the early service, but I had a slingshot, and every child, especially little boys, should have a slingshot. There we go. Good catch. Because a slingshot is something you carry around with you, and it can be a weapon, but we use it more as a toy. And you should never shoot at anything living, but we usually do. Like, boom, wow. And you try different ammunition, and you try shooting at different things, and you try shooting at different people. Look out. Like, for instance, I have yet to try a ping pong ball. This could go well, or this could go really bad. Oh, wow. All of those worked. One worked at the early service. All right. So it's fun to go around with our weaponry and shoot at other things and other places and other people. We can make other people our target. Sometimes our slingshot is our Bible. Sometimes it's not. Let me tell you a little story about a boy and his slingshot and his grandma and his sister. A little boy was visiting his grandparents, and he was given his first slingshot. He practiced in the woods. I grew up playing in the woods too, special place. But he could never hit his target, so he started to practice. As he came back to Grandma's backyard, he spied a moving target, her prize-winning pet duck. On impulse, he took aim and shot, and he hit his target. And the duck fell over dead. And that is where fear took over for the boy with the slingshot. He started to panic. Desperately, he hid the duck in Grandma's wood pile, only to look up, and he saw that his older sister was watching the entire time. His sister Sally saw, but she said nothing right then. Shortly after that, Grandma called the family in for lunch. After lunch, Grandma said, "Sally, come on now, let's wash the dishes." You see, Sally was the older sister, so her chores around the house were often centered around Grandma and her world. But now was Sally's chance to get out of her hated chores. So when Grandma told her to get the plates, to bring them to the sink, she said, "Grandma, Johnny told me he wanted to help in the kitchen today." "Didn't you, Johnny?" She whispered to him, "Remember the duck." So that day, Johnny did the dishes. All along, he kept thinking to himself about what he had done and how sad he was and how ashamed he was, because he loved his grandma. Later, Grandpa asked if the children wanted to join him and go fishing. Grandma said, "I'm sorry, I can't go. I need to stay and make supper. Sally, you stay here and help me." But Sally smiled and said, "That's all taken care of. Johnny wants to do it." Again, she whispered to him, "Remember the duck." So Johnny stayed, and he held his feelings of guilt inside of him, even while standing right next to his beloved grandmother. All the while, Sally went fishing and had a grand time with Grandpa. After several days of Johnny doing his chores and her chores, finally, he just couldn't stand it any longer. He confessed to Grandma. He cried into her apron while she embraced him the whole time in her loving arms. He cried out his confession. "Oh, Grandma, I killed your duck. It was an accident. I'm so sorry." "I know, Johnny," she said, giving him another hug. "I was standing at the window in my kitchen washing dishes, and I saw you do it the whole time. But because I love you, I forgave you immediately. But I just wondered how long you were going to let your older sister make a slave of you. How long would you let them make you a slave to their weaponry, to their slingshot?" You see, a slave is someone who's captive. They don't have a choice any longer. It's like being in prison. You see, in Jesus' story, the one we call the Prodigal Son, we hear and focus a good bit on the loose living and reckless younger son, because we all know he is the prodigal one, right? The word prodigal means wastefully extravagant, reckless. Some scholars believe Jesus is actually repurposing a very old story, but he's putting his Jesus twist on this old story. There was a similar story that was actually a warning used to scare people. You know, the Scared Straight program? That was this years ago. It used to be the story of a young son who left, spent all he had, and he tried to come home again. But he was utterly scorned and rejected by his father and his family. The warning was implied: if you ever do this, you can never, ever come home again. But in Jesus' telling, the father is completely opposite. He runs out to greet his wandering son, knowing he most certainly doesn't have to do that. He wasn't compelled, you see, the father, by rules or disappointments or resentments of the past that he might have been holding on to. Love compelled his action. He is extravagant with his love and his forgiveness. The late pastor, one of my heroes, Tim Keller, as we take a look at this story, he asked, which one of these people in the story is God? Which one do you think is God? Go ahead. The father in the prodigal son story is God. And Pastor Keller says the father is actually the prodigal one, because he is the one who is wastefully extravagant with everything he has. Let's review. He gives an entire inheritance to a son who simply asks while he's still alive. He waits and sees the son when he is far off, and he's filled with compassion that isn't deserved. He runs to greet him, something a respectable man in those days would never do. He embraces his son, something that many fathers still never do to their children, especially their sons. And then it says in verse 20, what does he do? He kisses his son. How many fathers have ever done that to a grown son? The father, not even listening to the son's confession, orders his servants, go get the best threads, go get the best robe, put it on him, and get some jewelry, put it on his fingers, and get the fatted calf. We're going to eat brisket tonight, baby. It's going to be a cookout. Go and bring it. My son was lost, but now he is found. The most wastefully extravagant person in this whole story that Jesus tells is the father. With his embrace, with his welcome, with his love and his generosity. And most of us in the story right there, like the Hallmark version of it, at the happily ever after. But Jesus doesn't end the story there. Here he describes another brother in the story, the older brother, the one who never ever left his parents' side. When he sees the brother, his wasteful brother, return, he is the opposite of happy and excited. In fact, it says he is filled with rage. How dare he come back? Verse 29, for all these years I have been working for you, working like a slave. That's what he feels like his relationship to the Father is, a slave. And you never even bought me a Biggie Fries or a Happy Meal for me and my friends. But when this loser, this son of yours, it says in the original text, not even my brother, this son of yours, who spent your fortune on loose living, liquor, and drugs, comes back home, you dare to celebrate? Says to the father, how dare you? How dare you? The father answers in love, son, you're always with me. All I have is already yours. But your brother was dead. My son was dead, and he has come back to life. Now, who does that make you think of? Jesus. How could we not celebrate, the Father says? We thought he was dead, but he is alive again. At the beginning of this chapter, Luke 15, it says tax collectors and sinners were coming to Jesus, but the religious, the older brothers in that real life story, the religious scholars were coming, and they were jealous. They were grumbling, saying, this fellow, they don't call him rabbi, they don't call him brother, this fellow welcomes sinners and, clutch my pearls, eats supper with them. How offensive. This part of the story, I want to give credit. The inspiration to it comes from my dear friend, the Grateful Ed Kilborn. Thank you, Ed. Now, I wonder what it was like in that family after Jesus ended his story. Did he stay? Did the older son show up to the party for his younger brother? Or did he say, if those people are going to be there, I don't even want to be a part of it? And I wonder about that younger son, the one we've always called the prodigal one. I wonder if he stayed home, or was his brother's judgment and hatred and resentment enough to send him right back out? Wonder with me. Come on, imagine with me for a minute. Imagine that younger son did leave. He left again. He left the comfort of his home. But now, imagine with me what it would be like if the prodigal son went back out into the world, only this time, instead of wastefully spending money on loose living, he was focused on wastefully spending forgiveness and hope, the inheritance he truly received from his loving Father. A way of living and seeing other people in their brokenness that was wastefully extra extravagant, and giving and living based on forgiveness in a way his older sibling just could never understand. I'd like to picture him now telling other people what it's like to really come home again, to shed those tears clinging to your father's chest and hearing that I love you, and the kiss from his father on a grown son cheek for the first time in his entire adult life. Imagine what it was like for Jesus when he finally left us and went home on that Good Friday to his Father, and we thought he was dead. But he didn't stay gone, friends. He came back, and he came back to tell us what it was like, and that there is hope for tomorrow. And then we can come along with him. And he gives us his Spirit and his promise that he's always going to be with us through the Holy Spirit wherever we go. Wherever he is, that is our home. That is our safe space, our abode. And guess where Jesus is? Brother, he's everywhere. As Bob Goff says, we really don't come home to a place. We come home to people. to people. And God's people are everywhere. And we get to bring that home back out into the world. Even as older siblings, or those who represent them, look upon us and sneer and judge, because we have that memory of our Father's loving embrace. We get to bring heaven even out to our older siblings. Now imagine with me what it was like for that older brother, the one who was stuck. I think he was the one who was really a prisoner, not the one who was loose living. I think it's the older brother, the older sister. He wants to keep the younger brother stuck in the narrative he is telling in his head. Because in that story, guess who the hero is? He is. And he is always comfortable in that story. But there's also resentment that he just cannot let go of, or he refuses to let go of. It's like religion can be. We call it a mighty fortress, and it's often built upon loyalty and earning our Father's favor by what we do and what we say. Jesus tells his story to a people who are exactly like the older brother. But the invitation is there for them and for us who build up churches of the older sister, the older brother. Jesus says, come on, confess. Come and follow me and find forgiveness and a whole new community. I saw a picture of what I like to think the older brother ended up being. He's right there. About a 53-year-old who was stuck watching a wonderful parade from his wheelchair. He was stuck physically, but he wasn't stuck emotionally anymore, because community was being built around him and his confession of love and that embrace that I bet he never received as a young man from his loving father. But he was more than ready to give that loving embrace. The Daily Mail of London recounts the story. I'm going to read it to you. A Texan has gone viral on social media after bringing a sign describing himself as a, quote, recovering bigot and offering free hugs to people at his very first Pride parade. Justin Nash, 53, sat in his wheelchair with a homemade placard close to the entrance of the Denver Pride Fest, which was attended by over 100,000 people. Nash credited his 22-year-old son, Jackson, for pushing him to become a more accepting person. The story surrounding my father's action has so much more to do with the heart behind both sides than it does a sign and any words. It has all to do with the willingness to see humanity in someone else and value them equally, whether you agree with them or like them or not. Being inclusive doesn't just involve people in the LGBTQ+ community. It ensures that everyone has a seat at the table and that their voice is heard. He added that his dad attended the parade alongside his mom, who texted the son afterwards to say how happy my dad was to be a part of something so special. Streams of people, the Daily Mail said, stopped by to take Nash up on his offer of free hugs and praise for the pride convert has since poured out. One woman who dashed to hug Nash told him, "We love you. We love you. Thank you." While another partygoer placed a multicolor hibiscus flower necklace over his head. He's wearing it in pride. He told the Washington Post that he had been on a decades-long quest to unlearn beliefs which had calcified during his childhood growing up in a religious family. Church of the Older Brother, anyone? Now I wonder if there was someone who was there that day who felt that embrace from him that they never received from their father or their mother. And it was instant healing. Maybe someone who would have been contemplating taking their own life because the churches around them, the churches of the older brother, had always told them that God did not love them. But then they met an older brother who had a different story to tell, who was giving out free hugs along with his confession And the embrace he received from them was the embodiment of the forgiveness that I bet he was looking for and hungry for too. For the same Jesus who told us that story about the prodigals actually teaches us a prayer where we get to say, "Forgive us our trespasses as we forgive those who trespass against us." Now go back to where I started. Back to that story about the duck and the grandma and Sally and Johnny and the slingshot. I wonder, what are you going to do now with your slingshot? Amen.